Taxpayers have been generous for too long. That's what was said this week in Australia about autistic kids on the NDIS.
Welcome to Unmasking with StimmyLu.
Hi, I'm StimmyLu. I'm autistic and I'm a parent to autistic kids. I don't speak for all autistic people, but I do speak from lived experience. And I have been an autistic kid once. The Australian government is framing autistic children and families as greedy, as if we are the problem, not the systemic failures and unchecked fraud running rampant through the NDIS, wasting billions. This is scapegoating at its finest. Let's hope I get through this video without a meltdown. So today I came across an article in the Australian Financial Review titled, "This Thing is a Beast. NDIS Insiders Speak Out." It featured psychologist Claire Rowe, who painted autistic families as desperate, dishonest, and chasing autism diagnoses as some kind of golden ticket to funding. This came right after Australian Health Minister Mark Butler announced a brand new program called Thriving Kids. From mid-2027, children with what he calls mild and moderate autism will be diverted away from the NDIS into this program. Butler's exact words were, "We do need, as a matter of urgency, to create a better arrangement that will enable our children to thrive." He said the NDIS is out of control, citing that 1 in 10 children aged 5 to 7 are now on the scheme. He promised to cut NDIS growth from 8% down to 5 to 6%. He also admitted that fraud is rampant, with only 16,000 of 260,000 providers registered, warning about dodgy operators bringing in anyone off the street to become a disability support worker. But instead of fixing that problem, his plan is to cut autistic kids' funding. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese backed Butler, calling it necessary reform to refocus the NDIS on whom it was intended. So that's the backdrop. Let's look at what's being said and what's actually true. Let's spill the tea. Claire Rowe, a psychologist, claimed that parents come in desperate for a diagnosis of autism, calling it a golden ticket to the NDIS. She even said some parents ask to be billed for appointments that they don't even attend, that mothers say, "It might be hereditary, I should be on a plan too." This framing makes families sound dishonest, manipulative, and greedy. But here's the reality. Autism is 80 to 90% heritable. It's not suspicious when more than one family member is autistic. It's expected genetics. Adults recognizing their own autistic traits, that's also not a scam. That's self-awareness in a neurodevelopmental condition that has been underdiagnosed in adults for decades, especially women. The NDIS has a use it or lose it rule. If families underspend, their future funding is cut. That pressure can drive desperation. Yes, Claire Rowe claims parents asked her to invoice sessions that never happened. But let's be clear, that is fraud, and any professional who agrees is breaking their code of ethics. That is not evidence that all autistic parents are liars. It's evidence that some professionals enable misconduct. The responsibility lies with the professional. Tarring us all with the same brush is not right or fair. If clinicians are misdiagnosing people for profit, that's not a parent problem. That's a professional misconduct problem. Psychologists, pediatricians, and psychiatrists who hand out false autism diagnoses to access NDIS funding are breaking their standards and should be audited, investigated, and if necessary, lose their license. Families who do meet DSM-5 criteria deserve to be diagnosed and supported. Families who don't should be turned away. Smearing all autistic families because some act unethically is scapegoating. Need the chamomile. Rowe also argued that parents struggle to spend all the money. That's not oversupply though. It's because wait lists, workforce shortages, lack of neuroaffirming care available, and in many regions, the only options are compliance-based like ABA, which families reject because they know it can cause trauma. Then we come to Butler. He claimed the scheme is out of control because 1 in 10 children aged 5 to 7 are on the NDIS. But that figure covers all disabilities, not just autistic kids. Using it to single out autistic kids is deeply misleading. We're not seeing an epidemic of autism. We're seeing recognition, especially in girls, high-masking kids, and people without intellectual disability who were overlooked for decades. So when Butler says kids with mild or moderate autism, he's misrepresenting the science. Mild autism isn't a clinical term. The DSM-5 uses support levels: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 requiring support, level 2 requiring substantial support. Keep in mind, substantial and moderate don't mean the same thing. And level 3 requiring very substantial support. But every one of those levels represents clinically significant impairment in everyday functioning in life. That is exactly what the NDIS was created to fund. They want to exclude kids who can talk, who can mask, who may appear fine while suffering silently. If we can't see it clearly, then it's not there. Still facing bullying, exclusion, and daily disability. This is deeply dangerous because some of the most vulnerable autistic children are the ones who mask. They look fine in public, especially if you don't know what autism looks like, but they are suffering the most in silence or when they go home. By drawing an artificial line, only autism with intellectual disability or this or other co-occurring conditions deserves the NDIS. Autism with cognitive delay is seen as real, impactful. Autism without it is dismissed. That's your problem. Families can do better. We're doing enough. All autism deserves support. And this is where the real danger lies. When politicians broadcast to the country mild or moderate, the public hears not really autistic, probably pretending. This article is what fuels disbelief. It tells society that some autistic kids don't deserve help, but masking is real. Many autistic children look fine at school, smiling, following the rules, holding it all together. Then, as we know, they come home and collapse into meltdowns and shutdowns. Experiencing school can't. Some level 2 kids actually suffer more day to day than level 3 because their needs are often invisible to the outside world. This rhetoric teaches the public to doubt autistic people, especially those who mask. It makes life even more dangerous for families who are already questioned, already stigmatized, already dismissed, already struggling with imposter syndrome, already made to justify and explain themselves. So now let's look at Albanese. He backed Butler's plan, calling it necessary reform to refocus the NDIS on whom it was intended. But the explanatory memorandum of the NDIS Act 2013 made autism explicitly eligible. Pretending autism was never intended is rewriting history. And then in this article, we have Martin Laverty of Aruma, who cheered on these changes, saying, "Taxpayers have been generous for too long." And that's honestly so dehumanizing. It frames autistic families as greedy, as if our supports are charity, not rights. It echoes the same rhetoric used historically against other marginalized groups. Too costly, too many of them, undeserving. They ignore autistic people and families are taxpayers too. Autistics pay income tax, GST, fuel tax, property tax. Parents of autistic kids pay tax. Autistic adults pay tax. This false divide, it echoes RFK Jr.'s sentiment, taxpayers versus autistic families. It's just a lie. And after we've come so far, here's the biggest contradiction of all. The Australian government has a national autism strategy, co-designed with actually autistic people, built on neuroaffirming principles. It rejects labels like mild and severe, low functioning, high functioning. It recognizes autism is lifelong and it promises social and economic inclusion. Yet, Butler's Thriving Kids, that plan breaks every principle of that strategy, especially the way that this was brought to the public. It uses mild, moderate spin and it treats autism as temporary. It excludes kids from supports they are legally entitled to help fulfill their human rights. And it was announced without autistic consultation. You can't claim to deliver a national autism strategy on one hand and then cut autistic kids out of the NDIS with the other. Labor has pledged $2 billion for a new program, but here's the problem. It will be block funded across schools, health centres, and providers nationwide. $2 billion may sound big, but when spread across every school and provider, it works out to be crumbs for children. Autism is a spectrum. Support needs are varied and individual. Some kids need regular speech therapy or consistent occupational therapy or sensory supports tailored to their individual needs. And if history is any guide, block funding means generic workshops, resilience classes, parenting programs, a one-size-fits-none. And it's being sold as early intervention, then exit. But autism is lifelong. Support needs can change, but autism doesn't disappear. Cutting kids off after a few years is like giving a diabetic insulin for 5 years and then saying, you're done. That's not thriving. That's kids going into regression. Nicole Rogerson of Autism Awareness Australia publicly supported Thriving Kids, but she has links with Inklings, which is a program that autistic advocates have criticised as ABA style. So that's a serious conflict of interest concern, don't you think? Families are already so worried that Thriving Kids will look like ABA and that it's just going to be rebranded in a new label. It's a real concern because ABA has been linked to PTSD in autistic adults and condemned by autistic advocates worldwide as harmful. What happens if autistic kids are diverted out of the NDIS into this program? Children will be left in schools that already fail them. Parents, especially mothers, will quit work to homeschool. Families will burn out even further. Autistic kids will regress. And the message to society will be clear. Autism isn't real, or at least not real enough to deserve support. Cutting kids won't save money. It will only shift the bill to emergency departments, homelessness services, prisons, and broken families down the track. So this is where we need to zoom out. So when you hear too many autistic kids on the NDIS, don't be fooled, because autism hasn't exploded. Recognition has. Better diagnostic criteria has. In the 1990s, autism was thought to affect 1 in 2,500. Today, it's 1 in 36 children in the US and 1 in 70 Australians overall. Not because autism is new, but because for decades, autistic people have been invisible, misdiagnosed, and punished for traits society refused to understand and accept. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Autism is one of the most dangerous disabilities to have in society. Not because of autism itself, but because of the discrimination. Autistic kids are suspended 4 times more often from school. Autistic adults have the lowest employment rate of any disability group in Australia. Autistic people die by suicide at 9 times higher than the average rate. Life expectancy is 20 to 30 years shorter, mostly from preventable cases. This is why families cling to the NDIS, because every other system has failed. Schools failed, health failed, workplaces failed. And now the government wants to punish autistic families and children for that failure. But the truth is the NDIS, it's flooded because society is broken. The scheme is carrying the weight of every other system that refused to adapt. And cutting these kids doesn't make their needs go away. It just forces them into the mental health crisis pipeline, self-harm, suicide, hospitalization, homelessness. This isn't just a funding debate. This is civil rights. Autism is the next greatest human rights issue, the next fight after racism, sexism, part of ableism. We are being scapegoated, excluded, and written off. And history will judge that. So what is the real solution? It's not cutting autistic kids. It's fixing the systems that have failed them. Tighten regulation, not eligibility. Fraud and waste are real, but they're not being caused by autistic kids or parents. They're caused by dodgy providers and weak oversight. The government knows only 16,000 of 260,000 providers are registered. How about we fix that? Mandate registration, audit high-volume clinics, and penalise professionals who misdiagnose for profit. Rebuild our schools and health so they can actually support autistic children. That means enforcing individualised education plans, ending suspension culture, reducing wait lists, and training health workers to recognise autism instead of dismissing and misdiagnosing it. And yes, the government says Thriving Kids is their solution without talking to us. But the truth is, it is block funding. It's short-term and it's designed as early intervention, then exit. Society doesn't transform overnight. Without neuroaffirming practice and real accountability, Thriving Kids risks becoming another revolving door program, one that looks good on paper but fails families in practice. If the government truly wants fewer kids relying on the NDIS, they need to invest properly and permanently in schools and health, not outsource autistic kids to a temporary program that leaves them to fall through the cracks. Deliver the National Autism Strategy properly, not as a token plan, as a roadmap to embed neuroaffirming practice into every school, health service, and workplace. Autism doesn't disappear, but society can change to accept us. Co-design with autistic voices. Stop listening to ABA lobbyists. Start listening to autistic-led organizations and stop deciding for us and start working with us. The NDIS wastes billions of dollars on plan managers, support coordinators, and underqualified admin who don't read reports properly or who demand unnecessary repeat reports too early. Plus, billions on unchecked providers and fraud. So let's cut the waste and start spending smartly. Make supports and the system easier to coordinate and navigate, not cut choice and control and stop supporting children who rely on it. Invest in what reduces long-term reliance, early neuroaffirming therapy, assistive technology, and inclusive education, and strengthen the fraud prevention bodies so rorts and provider misconduct are caught early without punishing autistic families for a system that we don't control. And let's not forget, the government has already invested over $1 billion into the NDIS Fraud Fusion Task Force, a body made up of the Australian Federal Police, Austrac, the Tax Office, and the NDIA itself. That task force exists to stop the real rorts, the organised crime, the dodgy providers, the ghost invoices. Why are autistic families still being scapegoated when the government already knows where the real fraud lies? Because here's the biggest truth. The social model of disability is clear. Society is built against us. That's what makes us most disabled. Schools that suspend us or feel unsafe for us to attend, health systems that dismiss, punish, or misdiagnose, workplaces that exclude us or bully us. Supports are essential not because autism is fake, but because society is inaccessible. Cutting autistic kids from the NDIS won't fix fraud. The small percentage of parents who are committing fraud don't make up for all mild and moderate autistic kids. It won't fix waste. It will only force children backwards and fuel another wave of ableism and discrimination from our society. The real reform is simple. Regulate fraud. Fund inclusion, deliver the National Autism Strategy with neuroaffirming practice, and co-design with autistic voices. I don't speak for every autistic person. Autism is diverse. Every voice matters. As autistic voices, despite everything we're juggling against systems and a society built against us, we have been forced to speak up. We need to speak up. We need to advocate alongside organisations who see the gaps, who call out the stigma, and who fight the discrimination. Because if we don't, others will keep speaking for us. And they're getting it all wrong. Autistic people are not the problem. We are not the rort in the system. We are citizens, families, taxpayers, community members. We deserve a seat at the table in shaping the policies that affect us. Because when autistic people thrive, families thrive and society thrives. If you're watching and you're as angry as I am, good. Turn that anger into action. Tag or email your local MP. Email Mark Butler. Email Albo. Tell them autism is permanent and significant, and cutting kids is discrimination. Sign the petitions linked below. Share this video. Speak out. Follow autistic-led organisations like Reframing Autism. Don't let ABA lobbyists speak for us. Because if we raise our voices together, they can't ignore us. And our kids deserve better. This is StimmyLu. You're not here to fit in, you're here to be you. Toodaloo.